Part 1. My son said the neighbors would notice my walker. My son told me the neighbors would stare if I came to his housewarming party. That is what he said. Not harshly, not with raised his voice. He said it the way people say things they have rehearsed in their heads a dozen times before finally speaking. Carefully, gently, like the softness of delivery somehow changes what is being delivered. My name is Margaret Louise Hensley. I am 71 years old. I live alone in a small house outside of Raleigh, North Carolina. And 9 days ago, my son explained, quietly, politely, that my presence might make his new neighborhood feel a certain way. I have been turning that conversation over in my mind every single morning since, trying to hear it differently, trying to convince myself he meant something else, the walker perhaps, or my compression socks, or the way my speech slows down when I get nervous in large rooms. Anything other than what I know he actually meant. Old, out of place, a thing that does not match the picture he is building of himself. I almost did not share any of this. I sat down twice to record it, and both times I stopped, not because the words would not come, but because the whole thing felt too ordinary to be painful. That is the dangerous thing about a certain kind of hurt. It does not arrive dramatically. It arrives in afternoon light, over decent coffee, from someone who still calls you mom while handing it to you. My son is named Daniel. He is 43 years old. He moved into a new house last month in a neighborhood where all the lawns look professionally trimmed and all the front porches hold matching rocking chairs nobody actually uses. He called to invite me 2 weeks ago, then called again 5 days later to uninvite me. He came over in person for that second conversation. I had made banana bread that morning, his favorite since he was 6 years old. I had even found the old tin pan I always used, the one with the small dent on the left corner from the time he knocked it off the counter running through the kitchen as a boy. He sat down on the edge of my sofa without taking off his jacket. That alone told me something. People who intend to stay a while take their jackets off. Daniel kept his on. He folded his hands together and said he needed to talk about Saturday. The party was Saturday. About 60 guests, string lights in the backyard, catered appetizers, neighbors he was still trying to impress after only 3 weeks on the block. I asked if he wanted some bread. He said no, thank you. Did not even glance toward the kitchen. That part hurt more than it should have. I know that sounds small, but sometimes the smallest things carry the most weight, especially when you have spent decades being someone's mother, and you can still feel the exact moment they stop needing you the way they used to. He cleared his throat once, then said the words. He said, "Mom, I just worry people won't know how to respond to you." I sat quietly for a moment. Outside, a lawnmower passed slowly down the street. Somewhere a dog barked twice, then went silent. And all I could think was, respond to me. As if I had become something requiring a response strategy rather than a greeting. But what Daniel said next, that is the part one cannot stop hearing. That is the part one need you to understand before anything else in this story makes sense. Part 2. He sat in my late husband's chair and used words like optics. Daniel said, "I just don't want the mood shifting the moment people see you walk in." The mood. Not hello, not conversation, not their comfort. The mood. I did not answer immediately. I held my coffee cup with both hands and watched him carefully. I have watched Daniel his entire life. I know the difference between his nervous face and his resolved face. This was resolved. He had already made this decision before he walked through my door. Then his girlfriend came in. No, knock. She walked in through my front door the way people walk into places they have already mentally rearranged. Her name is Courtney. She is pleasant enough in the way that certain people are pleasant without being warm. She sat down in the armchair across from me, my late husband Gerald's chair, the brown one with the worn armrest where he used to rest his coffee every Sunday morning for 31 years. Funny how strangers start occupying spaces without understanding what those spaces hold. Courtney smiled quickly and said they were both just trying to think of everyone's comfort. Everyone's. She used that word the way people use umbrellas, to cover themselves while appearing to cover others. Then she mentioned optics. That was her actual word, optics. She said some of the neighbors were fairly prominent in their industry, whatever that meant, and that first impressions in a new neighborhood tended to last. Her eyes moved briefly toward my walker parked beside the hallway. Just once. But I saw it. After my hip replacement last spring, people started looking at me differently. Not cruelly usually, just differently. like I had crossed some invisible line from person into category, something to be accommodated or avoided, depending on the inconvenience involved. I asked Daniel plainly, "What exactly are you trying to say to me?" And he said the sentence, the real sentence underneath all the careful ones. He said, "I think some guests might not be sure how to include you, and I don't want anyone feeling awkward." Anyone, not me, anyone. I spent 22 years driving Daniel to school, to practice, to hospital waiting rooms when his appendix ruptured at 14. I worked 2 jobs for 4 of his growing up years after Gerald's business closed. I sat in the parking lot of his college dormitory for 45 minutes on the first day of his freshman year, just sitting there, making sure I did not cry until I was far enough away that he would not see. But now, apparently, I was a potential source of awkwardness at a catered housewarming party. I could feel something shifting quietly inside me then. Not rage, something older and more deliberate than rage. Something that had been forming slowly, like a photograph coming into focus in a dark room. I looked down at the banana bread cooling on the counter. Nobody had taken a single slice, and I thought about all the mornings I had made food for people who eventually stopped being hungry for what I offered. Daniel stood first. Courtney gathered her things. They left quickly, the way people leave when the necessary thing has been said, and staying longer only risks undoing the delivery. At the door, Daniel touched my shoulder briefly and said he hoped I understood. Then he left. And I stood alone in my own kitchen, in my own house of 34 years, suddenly feeling like a guest who had overstayed a welcome I never actually agreed to surrender. I want to ask you something, before we go further. If your own child sat across from you and explained, gently, carefully, that your existence might complicate the atmosphere of a room, what would you do with that? Because I did not know. Not that night. But I was about to find out. Part 3. I pulled the filing cabinet out after 32 years. After they left, I stood in the living room a long time without sitting down. The coffee had gone cold. The banana bread sat untouched on the counter. Outside, the lawnmowers and the dog and the ordinary sounds of a Thursday afternoon continued as if nothing significant had just happened inside my house. That is the particular cruelty of quiet devastation. The world does not pause for it. Eventually, I walk down the hall to the small back bedroom I use as a study. In the corner sits a gray metal filing cabinet, 4 drawers. I have kept it locked for nearly 12 years. Gerald and I bought it together the year Daniel started elementary school. We were worried, the way young parents worry about everything, that we needed to be more organized, more prepared for the future. Gerald was always prepared. That was one of the things I loved about him. I sat down at my desk for almost an hour before I opened the cabinet. The key lives on the same ring as my car keys. I have looked at it thousands of times without thinking about it. That night I thought about it. Inside the top drawer are folders. Gerald's handwriting on some of the older tabs, my handwriting on the newer ones. Property records, trust documents, insurance, saving certificates going back 27 years. What Daniel does not know, what he has never known, is that I have been quietly building something for a very long time. People see a retired school librarian with a walker and compression socks, and they assume they understand the complete picture. They do not. I grew up poor, genuinely poor, the kind where new shoes were a twice-a-decade occasion, and dinner sometimes meant crackers and whatever was in the back of the pantry. My mother was a practical woman who believed in holding on to things. She taught me that survival was not about grand gestures, it was about patience, about noticing opportunities that other people dismissed as too small to bother with. I inherited that from her, along with her kitchen table and her cast iron pan. So while I clipped coupons and drove a car with a cracked dashboard for 11 years and bought my clothes from the clearance rack, I was also paying attention. A rental property here, a modest investment there, nothing glamorous. Nothing that would catch anyone's attention. Just quiet, steady, incremental work done over 3 decades by a woman everyone assumed was simply getting by. I opened the second drawer. Inside was a folder labeled with Daniel's name. His name has been attached to most of what I built, in one way or another. Every deed, every account, every beneficiary designation, at some point Daniel's future was threaded through it. Because from the moment he was born, my own future stopped feeling entirely separate from his. I pulled out the trust document slowly. 14 pages. My attorney updated it 2 years ago. At the top of the first page was Daniel's full legal name, Daniel Robert Hensley. His middle name was Gerald's name. I stared at that page for a long time. I thought about the night Gerald died, Not dramatically, but quietly, in the hospital on a Tuesday, the way he had done almost everything. I thought about coming home to this house alone for the first time and sitting at this same desk and thinking, the only thing left to do is make sure Daniel is taken care of. That had been my organizing principle for a very long time. But sitting there at midnight with a cold cup of coffee and the filing cabinet open around me, I started wondering something I had never allowed myself to wonder before. Whose future had I actually been protecting all these years? And did that person still deserve it? Part 4. My friend Vivienne asked me one question that changed everything. I called Vivienne around 1 in the morning. Vivienne Tate has been my closest friend since we were 24 years old. We met at a community college night class, both of us taking accounting because we needed it, both of us exhausted, both of us sitting in the back row with coffee that was already cold. She answered on the first ring. I said her name once. She said, "What happened?" Women who have been friends for 47 years learn each other's silences. I told her everything. The party, the optics, the jacket he never took off, the banana bread nobody touched. I told her about Courtney and Gerald's chair. Then I repeated what Daniel had said about people not knowing how to respond to me. Vivienne was quiet for several seconds. Then she asked me something I have not been able to stop thinking about since. She said, "Margaret, when was the last time Daniel looked genuinely proud, standing next to you?" I opened my mouth to answer, and then simply could not. Not because the question hurt, though it did, but because I honestly could not remember. I could remember affection. I could remember obligation. I could remember a kind of nervous management that I had been mistaking for attentiveness. But pride? Not for a long while. Vivienne came over the next morning with strong tea and no speeches. She sat at my kitchen table and looked through the open filing cabinet with me in a quiet, practical way. No dramatic reactions, no easy comfort. Vivienne has never been a woman who rushes to cover pain before you have had a chance to understand what shape it is. She held up the property deed for the Greensboro rental and said, "He has no idea about any of this, does he?" "Not a question," I said. "It was supposed to be a surprise, someday." She looked at me carefully over her reading glasses. I had imagined the moment for years, Daniel discovering, after I was gone, that the woman he worried about in front of his neighbors had quietly and methodically built something substantial on his behalf. I wanted him to feel protected. I wanted him to feel the weight of everything I had done for him, without ever making him feel the weight of it. That had always been the plan. Vivienne set the deed down slowly and said something I have been carrying with me ever since. She said, "Margaret, are you sure you still want your entire future attached to someone who is embarrassed to have you in the same room?" I did not answer immediately. I looked around my kitchen, the crack in the ceiling above the refrigerator that Gerald always meant to fix, the curtains I bought in 2003 and never got around to replacing, the tin pan on the counter with the dent in the left corner. 34 years of a life, all of it pointing in one direction, and suddenly I was not certain that direction still made sense. I am not a dramatic person. I have never been someone who made loud decisions. Even my biggest choices have been quiet ones, made at kitchen tables or on evening walks, carried privately until they were settled. So when I finally understood what I needed to do, it did not feel like a turning point. It felt like a door I had been standing in front of for a long time, finally choosing to open. I asked Vivienne if she thought I was being unreasonable. She answered too quickly. That is how I knew she had already thought about it before I asked. Part 5. I went to the party anyway. Vivienne told me I should go to the housewarming party. Not to confront anyone, not to cause a scene, not to prove anything. She said it plainly, the way she says most things. She said, "Because one day you'll need the memory accurate." That stayed with me. Not softened, not rearranged for comfort later. Accurate. So on Saturday afternoon, I got dressed slowly. At 71, formal dressing becomes a negotiation with a body that has its own opinions. The navy blouse I bought last spring still fit. I clipped my mother's small cameo brooch near the collar, the one she wore every Sunday to church until she passed. I had not worn it in 2 years. My hair took longer than usual. Hip recovery changes small things in unexpected ways. Buttons become adversaries. Your hands stop feeling entirely reliable. At one point, I sat on the edge of the bed and thought about calling the whole thing off. But something stubborn rose up quietly inside me. Not pride exactly, something older than pride. Something closer to the feeling you carry when you have survived enough to know that you can survive one more thing. Vivienne arrived at 4 with her good coat on. She looked at me for a moment at the door, the way old friends look at each other when they are both aware something significant is happening, and then she said simply, "You look exactly right." I almost cried. Not because I believed her entirely, but because I realized how long it had been since anyone said something like that to me and meant it without a qualifier attached. The party was in a neighborhood about 20 minutes from mine. The houses were large and recently renovated. Everybody's lawn was identical. String lights hung in the backyard among dogwood trees that were too young to be providing meaningful shade yet. Catered food on long tables, a bar near the back fence, guests in clothes that had clearly been chosen with the specific intention of appearing effortless. Understood immediately what Daniel had been worried about. That realization arrived without anger, just clarity. I could see myself the way he saw me, the walker, the slower pace, the woman who does not quite fit the aesthetic he is building around himself. For one honest moment, I could see it clearly. Then Vivienne touched my elbow and we walked inside. I found my name on a handwritten seating card near the back corner of the yard, beside the fence and the catering tent. Not near Daniel, not near anyone I recognized. A seat placed where it would minimize disruption. There are indignities so small that naming them makes you sound petty. You notice them anyway. Love notices placement. I sat down in my assigned corner. Vivienne sat beside me. No one at our table knew who I was. One man asked if we were with the catering company. I said no, politely. He looked embarrassed after, and then overcorrected by talking too much for the next 10 minutes. Even wounded, I found myself making him feel comfortable. That is a reflex that apparently survives everything. The party moved beautifully around me. Laughter, clinking glasses, people introducing themselves to each other with the particular energy of people who are auditioning for each other's lives. And I sat in my corner watching my son become, gradually, the person he had decided to be. He looked happy. I want to be honest about that. Daniel looked genuinely happy, and that mattered to me more than I wished it did. Part 6. I watched my son see me and look away. Halfway through the evening, Daniel spotted me across the yard. His smile changed for just a moment, not to warmth, but to something more like relief. Like a person who had been carrying a concern and just confirmed it was being managed within acceptable limits. I was not his mother in that moment. I was a variable that had been successfully contained. That realization moved through me slowly, the way cold water moves, not sharp, just thorough. Then, something happened near the end of the catered portion of the evening. A photographer was working the party, young woman with a nice camera, going table to table for candid and posed shots. She approached our corner of the yard and smiled professionally. Before she could ask, a woman at our table, pleasant, well-intentioned, not cruel, laughed lightly and said, "Oh, I think they might just be helping with the food." The photographer smiled and moved on. Daniel was nearby. He heard it or saw enough to understand what had happened. He looked over once, very briefly. Our eyes met for perhaps 2 seconds. Then he turned back to his conversation. That was the moment. Not the original conversation, not the seating arrangement. That moment, watching my son observe my quiet humiliation and choose the comfort of his party over the dignity of his mother. Once you see something that clearly, you cannot negotiate it back into ambiguity. I felt very calm afterward, an unusual kind of calm. Not the calm of resignation, but the calm of someone who has finally stopped arguing with a truth they have been avoiding. I leaned close to Vivienne and said, "I think I have been apologizing for existing for a very long time." She did not respond immediately. She closed her eyes briefly, the way she does when something lands somewhere deep. Then she reached into her purse and placed a cream envelope on the table in front of me. I had asked my attorney to prepare documents earlier that week. Trust revisions, updated beneficiary paperwork, a new direction for the substantial sum I had spent 3 decades assembling quietly. The foundation I had chosen helps women in transition, widows, women navigating late-life disruption, older women whose families have quietly moved forward without them. I had volunteered there briefly after my hip surgery. The women I met there had stayed with me. One woman had spent 3 months waiting for her daughter to return a phone call that never came. 3 months, she had counted. I remembered thinking when I met her that loneliness does to a person what weather does to an unprotected structure. Slowly, then suddenly, then permanently. I looked at the envelope for a long moment. Then I looked across the yard at Daniel, laughing with his arm around Courtney, entirely at home in the life he was building. A life with very specific aesthetic requirements that his mother did not meet. And I said to Vivienne quietly, "I think he's made this decision for me a few days ago." She stood up slowly, smoothed her coat, and walked across that backyard with the envelope in her hand. Not dramatically, not with any visible intention that would draw attention. Just one older woman moving carefully and deliberately through a group of people who barely noticed her. She stopped beside Daniel and said a few words I could not hear, handed him the envelope, then walked back toward me. That walk lasted maybe 30 seconds. It felt like something rearranging permanently. Part 7. The moment he understood what I had built. Daniel opened the envelope immediately. I watched him from across the yard. First he looked distracted, the way people look when they are handed something in the middle of a party, then puzzled. Then his expression shifted into something I had not seen on my son's face in a very long time. Stillness. Complete stillness. Courtney leaned over to read. Her reaction was faster, the particular expression of someone who has just recalibrated a significant assumption. Then Daniel looked up and found me across the yard. We looked at each other for perhaps 30 seconds. No noise in my head during those seconds. No party sounds, no music, no ambient laughter. Just my son's face across an expensive backyard, finally understanding something he had not known to account for. I did not smile, I did not wave, I did not look away, and I did not look angry. I simply looked back at him with the same steady new calm I had been carrying for hours. For the first time in years, I stopped trying to arrange my face into whatever expression would make him most comfortable. After a moment, I stood up carefully with my walker. Vivienne was immediately beside me, steadying without being asked. That is the particular grace of very long friendship. It shows up before you have to request it. I picked up my purse, and without another word, I walked toward the exit. Partway across the yard, I noticed something. No one stopped me. Not Daniel, not Courtney. Nobody called my name. The party continued around me as if I were simply a guest whose evening had come to its natural conclusion, which I suppose I was, in more ways than one. That hurt. I want to be honest about that. The absence of pursuit is its own kind of answer, but there was also something else present, something I did not expect, something that felt very much like relief. Outside, the air was cool and smelled like fresh-cut grass and someone's nearby garden. Vivienne's car came around from where she had parked it. I climbed in slowly while the sounds of the party continued faintly behind us. Then I looked down and noticed something. My mother's cameo brooch was gone. It must have come loose at some point during the evening, fallen somewhere in that yard. For a moment, something tightened in my chest. That brooch was the last piece of jewelry that had passed through my mother's hands and then mine. I wore it Sunday mornings, sometimes, when I was thinking about her. Vivienne offered to go back and look for it. I shook my head. "Let it stay," I said. I do not know entirely why I said that. But sitting there in the car, I think I understood something. I could not carry every old version of myself home with me anymore. Some things needed to be left behind in places where they no longer belonged. Vivienne drove without speaking for a while. Then she said, "How do you feel?" I thought about it honestly before answering, I said, like I finally stopped asking permission to take up space. She nodded once. That was enough. We drove through quiet streets past darkened houses. Ordinary life going on in the ordinary way of things, entirely indifferent to what had just shifted inside of me. But something had shifted. Permanently, I believed. The kind of shift that changes which direction you face without you having to think about it anymore. Part 8. Daniel called 3 days later. Daniel called on Tuesday morning. I was drinking tea at the kitchen table, watching the bird feeder swing slightly in the wind outside my window. I answered on the second ring. Mother's answer. Even the ones carrying quiet wounds. His voice was different than I expected. Not angry, shaken. The way a person sounds when something they considered permanent has suddenly become uncertain. He said, "Mom, why would you do something like this without at least talking to me first? Without talking to him first?" I almost laughed, not unkindly, just at the particular shape of that sentence. I said, "Daniel, you talk to me first." Silence on the line. Then he said he did not think I would actually go that far. I asked him what far meant, exactly. He said, "All of it. The documents, the foundation, all of it." I heard something beneath his words then, something that was not entirely about the money, something that was more about the realization that the future he had always assumed was being held in reserve for him had quietly, without ceremony, been redirected. That is a particular kind of understanding. It arrives differently than other kinds. Then he started crying. Real crying, not controlled, not polished. The kind that catches in the throat and comes out slightly broken, and underneath it, I heard him. Not the 43-year-old man who had scheduled me out of his housewarming party for the sake of neighborhood optics. The boy who used to fall asleep against my shoulder on long car rides. The one who cried quietly in the school parking lot when his best friend moved away in 4th grade and thought I did not see. Love is frustrating in that way. It does not update itself in accordance with the evidence. I looked out my kitchen window while he talked. Morning light coming through the glass. The bird feeder, the yard, the dented tin pan I still had not put away. Ordinary things continuing in their ordinary way. Then I said something I had never said out loud before. I said, "Daniel, for a very long time, I believed that love meant making myself smaller inside other people's comfort." He was quiet for a long moment. Then I told him this, as plainly as I could manage. I said, "The moment your child starts managing your visibility instead of protecting your dignity, something between you breaks." He did not respond immediately. I heard him breathing. Then he said he never meant to hurt me. That did not make it better. It made it more complicated. Cruelty does not always come from intention. Sometimes it comes from priorities, from the slow, ordinary accumulation of small choices that each seem defensible individually, but together constitute a pattern. From caring more about how something looks than how it feels to the person standing in the middle of it. I told Daniel the first loved him, because I do. That part was never in question, but I also told him that love and access were not the same thing, that I had spent too long confusing them. After we hung up, I sat at the table for a while. The bird feeder was still moving. Outside, a neighbor walked past walking their dog, both of them unbothered and entirely absorbed in their own morning. I noticed something then, sitting in my kitchen in a way I had not noticed in a long time. The house felt like mine again. Part 9. What the foundation did with what I built. The foundation sent me a letter 6 weeks later, a formal letter, the kind with embossed letterhead and careful language, but inside it was also a photograph. A courtyard, brick pavers, several round tables with chairs, a small garden along the far wall with yellow flowers I could not name from the photo, and in the corner of the courtyard, a modest stone plaque mounted at eye level, the Hensley Garden, in memory of Gerald Robert Hensley and in honor of the women who built quietly. I sat at my kitchen table with that photograph for a long time. I cried, which surprised me. I had not cried through most of this, not during the conversation on my sofa, not during the party, not during the phone call with Daniel. But looking at that photograph, something finally loosened. Not because my name was on a plaque. That part honestly mattered less than I expected. What moved me was the image of women sitting in that courtyard. The letter mentioned that residents gathered there in the afternoons. They had tea sometimes, they played cards. Occasionally someone brought flowers from the foundation's garden and arranged them on the tables. Ordinary things, small pleasures, the kind that feel enormous when you have been somewhere that made you feel invisible for too long. I thought about the women I had met during my brief volunteer work there after my surgery. One had been a school teacher for 38 years and had spent 18 months living with a daughter who treated her like a liability. One had outlived her husband and 2 of her children and was learning, at 78, what it meant to build a life around herself for the first time. One woman had simply said to me during our one conversation, "I just needed someone to look me in the face." I think about her often. Vivienne came over the afternoon I received the photograph. We sat at the kitchen table together, and I showed her the picture, and she looked at it for a long time without speaking. Then she said, "Gerald would have liked this." I said, "He would have complained about the brick color." She laughed. That felt good. I called the foundation to thank them. The director, a practical woman named Rosalind, told me the courtyard had already become the most used outdoor space in the building. She said residents who had been largely quiet in communal settings had started seeking it out. She used the word sanctuary, then immediately apologized for the dramatics of it. I told her it did not sound dramatic at all. There is something I want to say about what happened with the money, because I think people might assume it was about punishment. It was not. Daniel's name being removed from those documents was not punishment. It was recognition. Recognition that what I had built was a living thing, and that living things deserve to go toward people and purposes that will not treat them as something to be quietly managed, that will not tuck them behind a catering tent and hope they stay still. I am not a saint. I did not arrive at this peacefully. There were nights after the party when I sat in my study and second-guessed everything. Nights when I heard Daniel's voice on that phone call and wondered whether I had been too final, too swift, too certain. But then I remembered the stillness I felt in the car leaving that party. The way the house felt different when I walked back in that night. The particular quiet of a space that finally belongs entirely to you again. And I kept coming back to that. Part 10. What I know now that I did not know before. It has been 4 months since the party. The leaves have turned outside my kitchen window and come down again. The bird feeder has been visited, on average, by 11 different birds per morning, which I know because I started counting in October. Small pleasures. I have been paying more attention to them. Daniel and I have spoken 4 times since the phone call, cautiously, civilly. The way 2 people speak when they are still sorting out which version of their relationship still exists. Courtney has not been part of those calls, which I think is probably a grace for everyone. I do not know what will happen between my son and me. I have made peace with not knowing. That is new. At my age, I thought I had already made peace with most uncertainties, but this particular one took some time. I still have his childhood drawings in my hallway drawer. Still worry about him during bad weather. Still remember the exact weight of him as a sleeping toddler against my shoulder. The particular way his breathing slowed when he finally let go of the day. Love is like that. It stores itself in the body and does not ask permission to stay. But I have also started building something new. Not financially. That project was always more complete than anyone knew. I mean building something in the daily shape of my life. I joined a Thursday morning book group at the library where I spent the last years of my career. 9 women, ranging in age from 61 to 83, all of them opinionated about the books and even more opinionated about each other's opinions. It is the loudest silence I have enjoyed in years. I started writing letters. Not digital messages, actual letters, on actual paper, in the handwriting my mother taught me when I was 7 years old. I write to Vivian, who lives 20 minutes away and could easily call, but finds the letters more satisfying. I wrote one to the foundation director. I wrote one to a woman I met during my volunteer work, whose name I had carried with me for months without quite knowing why. I have been allowing myself to occupy space without apologizing for it. That sounds simple. It is not. 71 years of conditioning does not dissolve in 4 months. Some mornings I still catch myself arranging my expression before I walk into a room, still feel the old reflex to make myself smaller, easier, more manageable for whatever comfort requires. But I catch it now. That is the difference. I keep thinking about something Rosalind said when I called the foundation. She said that many of the women who come to them have spent so many years building their lives around other people's needs that they have genuinely forgotten what their own preferences feel like. That the first weeks are often spent rediscovering small things, what time they actually want to eat dinner, what kind of music they actually like, what their own opinion sounds like when no one needs it to be otherwise. I understood that more than I said. So here is what I want to leave you with, if you have listened this far. If you are standing somewhere in your life where you have been making yourself smaller to fit inside someone else's comfort, please hear this. You are not responsible for other people's ease with your existence. The cane, the walker, the slower pace, the age, the illness, the inconvenient truth of who you are, none of that is something you owe anyone an apology for. You built what you built. You carried what you carried. You showed up when it was not easy and stayed when it cost you things that can never be fully returned. You do not owe invisibility to anyone calling what they feel for you love. My name is Margaret Louise Hensley. I am 71 years old, and for the first time in longer than I can honestly account for, I am living inside my own life without waiting for permission to be there. If this story reached something in you tonight, please like this video and share it with someone who might need to hear it. There are more of us carrying this quietly than the world ever seems to realize.